You are listening to the Level Up Your Gaming Podcast, episode 141, Suspending Disbelief. In today's episode, we discuss suspending disbelief. We discuss why it's important for both players and GMs to engage in this process. We also discuss how to look past certain details to achieve a better game. If you'd like to participate in the discussion or leave us feedback, you can contact us at levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/levelupyourgaming. If you like the content and want to hear more of the show, subscribing will ensure you don't miss an episode. New episodes come out almost every Wednesday. Also, please review, tell a friend about the podcast, or share with your gaming group. Now sit back and enjoy the episode. Welcome into the Level Up Your Gaming Podcast. My name is Aaron, and joining me virtually once again, I've got Josh. Josh, how you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. How you doing today, Aaron?
I'm doing great. As good as I can be. We're kind of looking around at a potential house buying situation, and it is a stressful thing. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
If you've never done it before, it's a pain in the butt.
I have done it before, and I did not enjoy it then. I can't imagine it's any better now. You said that you had seen a couple of places that were recent flips.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
The problem with the flip is that you look at it, you know on the surface it looks good, but right below the surface, that house has not been taken care of properly, and things are not done correctly. It just looks good.
You can put as much lipstick as you want on a pig, but it's still a pig.
But if we were to engage in a fantasy environment, maybe you could just look past that and see the house for what it is, just on the surface, and sort of enjoy it.
Well,
what would you call that?
I would say that would be suspending disbelief. I wouldn't do that if you're buying a house, disclaimer, but when it comes to doing games, suspending disbelief is very important. I think this works in both aspects of the GM and the players. Okay, and it's sort of this is actually the contractual thing that you do with your players is to suspend disbelief. But I thought what was really interesting is when you had kind of started jotting down some notes about this topic, you were talking to it with your children, and they didn't know what you meant. So I think we'll start there.
Well, okay. So, and this is something I was thinking about when we're talking about leveling up your gaming. We're talking about being a better GM, telling a better story, having a better game session. Some of the people that may be listening to this, my kids wanted to listen to this, they are coming to gaming from a place of pure novice, right? They don't have sort of the shared history that some of us do, especially from decades of gaming. And suspension of disbelief is something that, while we may understand conceptually, it may not be part of everybody's repertoire. And what it means to suspend disbelief is that you can look past a work of fiction and sort of exist within a work and sort of enjoy it for what it is without noticing that it is a work of fiction. The example I saw online was, we know that, people don't fly or shoot lasers from their eyes, but you read some Superman or watch a Superman movie, and you're going to watch a guy fly and shoot lasers from his eyes, and you just let that happen. That is suspending the disbelief for that time. And setting up an environment in your game, in your story, to sort of facilitate that suspension of disbelief, to let your players sort of exist within the work, really makes a story, takes it to that next level. And makes it more of an experience for your players rather than just a game that they are currently playing.
That's a great point. I mean, again, it's looking past the rough edges on everything. We all know we're playing the game. Okay, we all know what we're doing, but it's giving your GM grace to make mistakes. It's giving your GM grace to mispronounce a city name or be inconsistent with city names and not be like, haha, you fool, I've got you. Okay. It's these little things that you look past, or inconsistency in detail. A great example of this in running all these mystery games that I've been doing. Inconsistency in detail happens all the time. Okay, it's a natural part. Like I'm not well versed enough to write the many versions of Clue that I need to write, but so I miss things and continuity breaks. Okay, it's incumbent upon my players to look past what I've done there. And again, there's all sorts of other things that you rolled out there. Is hit points, skill checks, attack, damage. All that is mechanical to make the game work, but we want to make it flow like you're cinematically moving through the game itself.
Another big one that I run into when you're talking about building a world and sort of you've got your players interacting with different parts of your city or different people. You're interviewing different people to solve a mystery. You're all just asking one dude. The GM is just sitting up there either putting on voices or just giving you answers, and that sort of breaks the immersion. And there are ways to get around that. You have to do a lot of prep work to really get into it, but there are some shortcuts. And I think I've laid out a couple of shortcuts here that we should go over. And sort of, if you are looking to do a pure suspension of disbelief and make it as magical a possible experience as you can for your players, you can spend every waking moment putting something together and doing a thing. But you don't have to do all that. You can do a couple of little things that'll sort of take you most of the way there. And I think it all starts with setting the mood.
Setting the mood. Ah, yes. I see you one of the things that you've mentioned, we've mentioned in several episodes. I did a whole episode on it, and I will probably rehash it with Josh because I'm interested to find out his thoughts on it, is the background music. Okay. And again, this is good and or bad, depending on how it's used. And I'm not going to do a background music episode right now. But if you do it well, okay, it is a great way to kind of engage players in the mode of, not even just the mode of like the scene, but in the mode of like, this is game time. We're in game right now. We've broken past, that part where we're just talking to one another before we start. And now we're playing the game. Like, it's a good way to divide those two things.
Yeah. And you could have, playtime music and then action music, and separating those things out is also useful because it sort of sets the mood. But what I found is really interesting with the VTT I'm currently working with, the virtual tabletop, is that it has not just options for music. You can set up your playlists, but you can actually drop in ambient and various other sounds to make the maps and game world seem more alive. So you can walk into a place, you can hear the hum of air conditioner, or walk past a vending machine and have it shout to you to buy yourself a burrito. And setting these things up takes a little bit of time. You're going to have to come up with a playlist anyway, and it should be, I would like to, and we're not talking about playlists, and we're not talking about what music we're talking about. I always think that you should sort of pick the music that fits best with the story you're telling or the part of the story you're telling. But music is very useful as a divider between, sitting in a basement and playing and actually playing a story. But that's another thing. Like we've talked about, I do almost all of my gaming virtually, and I have for a while now. But I remember the good old days where we all gather together in somebody's basement around a table, and one of the other big things you can use to set a mood is to set the proper lighting, the set decoration even. If you're just sitting in somebody's basement, that's one thing. But if you want to really, bring it down, put some curtains up around, make sure the tabletop is not just some tabletop. You throw a cloth down or, candles or whatever the hell it is that'll take you just that extra step. And that can really make a big difference between, I'm here to roll some dice on a character sheet and I'm here to tell a story.
No, that's a great point. And I think to kind of go along with that, I mean, again, it does sort of it engages you into the concept that you're doing the game itself. I think another one that the next one here that you've got is flavor text and getting into the scene itself. And I think this is a no brainer. This is how you immerse players beyond, like, you walk into a room, the room's like big, and there's people standing around. What do you want to do? Like,
Yeah.
that's not good. Like, you want to give some descriptors to the room. Okay, you walk into a room, it's warm and inviting. It's like you're trying to, again, you're telling a novel. You're a GM. Okay, your goal is to story tell, and so when your players walk into a room, they want to know what is there. Okay, when they walk into a combat situation, they want to know all the details around the room, because I want to use the cover, I want to use the banister to knock the guy out, I want whatever it might be. They want to know things about that. Also, the little details there help the players ask questions. Maybe there's a clan crest above the hearth of the fireplace. What does it mean? You ask the bartender. There are things like that to allow you to give description, that let the players can view the world as you are trying to tell it. Again, like you're reading a novel. When you read a novel, you suspend disbelief all the time. You're reading it. You're engaging in it. You're putting your mind's eye to it. When you are being told the story from the GM, that's the same thing. You want to have it be described to you in a way that allows you to believe you are in the world or viewing it, and you're walking through the world itself.
Yeah. Don't be afraid of flavor text. Flavor text, I think it's a bad rep because you get some of those old modules that are, you're reading a novel to your players while they wait for you to finish a couple of pages. You don't have to go crazy with it. If you're telling your own story, knowing your players is very important for flavor text. Find out what sort of brings them into a scene. If they're, all about the smells and the sounds, describe those things. If they're about the visuals, describe those things. Like, find something that your players like and use that as your entry point into sort of describing your scene. You don't have to go crazy with it. You don't have to like lay out every item that's in a room. Hit the big points, hit the things that are going to make a difference for what they're looking at. Okay, this room is this sort of thing. And then give them a couple of those details that they're looking for. That, if they walk into that 10 by 10 stone room and the air is stale and there's a slight smell of mold hanging in the air, they're going to be like, okay, there's smells, there's taste, there's a thing going on. You can sort of imagine the room, and that's it. That's quick and easy. So
KYP is a great point there, because I could tell you what, again, each one of these I could give you a whole bunch of things that I'm like just don't do this. Like, it's not good. Like, do not. We're gonna have a you probably shouldn't do that episode again in the future, and we'll give you like 10 more things that you probably shouldn't do in a game. So
okay, so that's setting the mood. When you're actually telling your story, to keep people into it, I think that setting some foreshadowing is a great way to do things. Stories go in certain directions and they have things that happen. You need to have inciting incidents, you need to have action, you need to have sort of a flow to your story. You can't just, I mean, you could, but it's a really boring game. Just take your players and send them somewhere and they do a thing, and then they send them somewhere else to do another thing. There's no flow, there's no reason, there's no story. And that there's no reason to suspend disbelief if they are just playing a dungeon crawl.
it's a perfectly good way to start DMing. This is, once you've kind of learned the way to DM, how do you then, make things, Josh is right, make things flow from scene to scene, or make things flow from, different things that you're going to do. Like, you had an example of the encounter table here. Like, how do you walk into that encounter and make it more, it's not just like, hold on a second, guys, as you toss down your dice and you're like, okay, that's a 32. Okay. So you got bandits on the highway. They're going to rob you in the woods. Like, that's part of the game. Yes. But if you want to take it to the next level there, and again, this is the Level Up Your Gaming podcast, explain, that maybe you've been hearing a bunch of rumors about bandits. Maybe you already rolled the random encounter. You've been hearing a bunch of rumors about it. And so it allows your players to be cautious against the encounter. Okay. It allows your players to maybe try and circumvent the encounter altogether. It allows options around the encounter that you've laid out, but it also gives life to the world. And again, you talked about this in our last episode, talking about how, you're trying to give examples of how something happens. You're trying to make the random encounter not so as random as the thing that you just rolled.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have a lot of options behind the DM screen, the GM screen, and you should do the things, but not necessarily announce them. You should make the choices, make the rolls, but don't say, I'm rolling to see what random encounter you're getting. You can sort of foreshadow the options. And then when something happens, they're already expecting something, but they don't know what it is. It is still a random encounter, but you've sort of laid out those options. And you want to take it to a next level. Rumors are great. They walk into the bar room, they hear the rumors, but you take it to the next level. And one of the things they talk about when you do stories is show, don't tell. So instead of saying, there's a rumor that there's bandits on the highways, or it could be elven rebels, be careful out there. You could go and say, you walk into the bar room and there's a group of adventurers sitting at a table, nursing fresh wounds. And there's 3 people sitting at the table, but there's a 4th cup sitting there untouched. And now the players are like, okay, what's going on? And they're asking questions, they're getting involved, and then they can find out what's going on, and this is just, flavor text just to fill in the world. These people don't need to have names. They don't need to have personalities. They're just there, unless your players start to want to interact with them. And then that's up to you. But sort of filling in the world with the things that are going to happen takes some of that random encounter, so those random events, or even, the way that your story is going to go, and sort of directs your players into the right path. And it helps suspend all of the weirdness of games and make it more of a story.
That's a great point. I mean, again, you want to, I don't typically like the random encounter side of things, but if you are going to do it, these are ways to make them fit in a game. Like it helps glue them better into the game and helps make things make sense. When things start to make sense, your players are more engaged. When your players are not talking as much as, Jessica and Steve at the table, you are more talking like, they're in character, they're talking with one another, or even commiserating with, the NPCs of the world, then you've sort of accomplished the goal. And so that's kind of what you got here. So that brings us to our next point, which is role play out conversations with your NPCs.
Now, this definitely does depend on the GM's ability to role play an NPC. If you aren't confident in your ability to do so, practice. I mean, it can be fun. It can also be daunting. If you are unsure of your ability, don't worry about it. It's a game. This is what you're doing here. You're sort of building these skills, and being able to sort of role play this out is going to help you in other areas of your life too. I mean, the number of times I've had to be in client meetings or, give presentations, sometimes being able to put on a personality for it is helpful. Not that I say you should, fake client meetings, but, it's helpful. The thing is, when you're doing an NPC, you do need to sort of separate out uh, the difference between I'm GMing this game and I'm now role playing a character. Um, so what I wrote on here was that you should come up with a signal. There should be some sort of switch over. I like to use one when I'm switching over from describing a scene to being a character in the scene, so the characters, the players can recognize that there is a difference. If you get that out early enough, if you build that into your story and the way that you're actually telling the story early, you can actually see some of your players will adopt it as well. And they will switch from being, I'm Jeff at the table, to being, I'm Eldrek at the table, telling the story. And that is a big part of being immersed in the story, is becoming the character, and having that separation is useful. Same as setting the mood, turning the music on, giving your intro to the game. All these things are okay, we're going from the real world to our fantasy world.
Yeah, and, I mean, I think those are great points to that. I think that you want to make sure that at a minimum, you always want your players to be engaging in character. Even if they're engaging they're not doing a crazy voice or whatever, that's fine. But you want them to engage in character and interact with their NPCs in character. And the other thing too is, I guess if you're not versed in practicing playing the NPC, the cheat is to say, this is a list of information that I have that the players will eventually need. Okay. And as you interact with different NPCs, because the player might talk to, maybe your players are not particularly talented at gathering information. And so they'll talk to any schmo at the bar. And so they talk to random guy number one who sits at the bar top. And you're like, well, that guy has no information. I don't know who this guy is. Okay. Well, you can make up a sad story about this guy and blah, blah, blah. Your players are going to be like, but what about the dragon that roosts upon the hilltops? And the guy's going to be like, that's the dragon that ate my family.
What do you think about the bar, man?
Okay, I'm drowning my sorrow at the bottom of this ale. Like,
and well, that's a big part of the whole yes and, is that be prepared to, sort of lean into a character and sort of go with a thing. Your players are going to go in weird places, and have stuff ready. Just be willing, understand how your world is supposed to work and what information is supposed to be out there, and be willing to just don't make them search for one guy.
Don't have one. I mean, that's part of a good mystery, is not to have one way to do something. Same thing here. You can use the information that's, maybe the mage in that tower was supposed to be the one who delivered them the information, but your players have no interest in going and seeing the mage that sits in the tower. And so Steve, who's at the bar, is the guy who has to give them the information about the dragon that roosts upon the mountain. So, I mean, be fungible with it, and it's a good way to be able to practice role playing your NPCs. Is that the fungibility of information allows any NPC to become a valuable person to talk to.
Now, you also brought up another thing, is that your players have no motivation to go up and talk to Steve or Dave or whoever the wizard was. I don't care about him now because I'm not going to go see him. Motivations are extremely important, and setting up those motivations, not just for your players. Your players are going to want to play a game. They're there to have a good time, and you're giving them plot hooks. But you want to make sure that the world is immersive, that they can sort of sit back and experience it as a story rather than a game. Your NPCs, good or evil, should have motivations also. The bad guy is not just a bad guy. He's not just doing bad guy stuff, running around twirling his mustache and tying maidens to railroad tracks for no apparent reason. They should have a reason to doing a thing. And if they've got, a whole cadre of henchmen that are following them around, there should be a reason for that too. They having motivation and following through on that motivation is going to make your characters more believable, and they're going to be easier to sort of roll with whatever punches because their motivation is based off of a set idea for this character. And if you set up a good motivation, it can actually tie into other ways your players can interact with these NPCs.
I mean, motivations are a great way to. So yeah, if you want to listen to a great episode that we did, I've done 2 improving NPC episodes, but in the second one, and this is the one that has actually been the most impactful when playing in one of Jared's games, has been he started creating links between his NPCs, being like who's their greatest, who's like their best friend, and who's their greatest adversary. Okay. And then also he will use like chaotic shiny to generate quirks about all of his NPCs. I mean, he goes like to the 9s on NPCs, but those quirks are very useful in terms of like if you can't come up with a good thing for your NPC to be, or just random NPC number 1 that the players encounter, use the tools that are out there. Again, go back to that episode, listen to it. Use the tools that are out there to be able to give the NPC quirks, because those quirks and those motivations, they make things come to life, and that helps in breaking in, not just breaking, but to create the immersion and really suspend disbelief. You're like, well, this is a real person. Like, why did you do this? I can remember in a game, he had an NPC that liked beards. Okay, it was a woman NPC, and one of our characters had a beard, and so she was like trying to put the moves on him constantly because she just liked beards. So it was just like a random thing that he had generated, and it gave different life to that NPC.
Yeah, and having those quirks is really nice because it gives them motivation, it gives them agency, it brings those characters to life. I think it's a great idea, and having those little bits and pieces fleshes out your world in a great way. Let's see. The next thing I had written down was, so we're talking about players. We're talking about NPCs motivation. We're talking about role playing characters and stuff. But I think that you should bring it back to your players. Give your players the agency to sort of interact with the system. Now, I'm not saying that you need to sort of let them break the rules or follow and do whatever they want, but players who come to a system and want to try something different, try something outside the realm of, rules as written, there is something to be said there. If they can come up with a reason, like in world, for this to happen, and you sort of work it into the story, work it into the way the story is written, you can get some sort of interaction outside of the rules of a system that allows your players to sort of feel that they're part of the story.
We've talked about this before, which is giving your players the ability to enact their good ideas, or their creative way to solve a puzzle. The rule of cool is even a good way to kind of go through this. This all gives the players agency in the world, that their actions are, again, they're bending the system. They're not the system is guidelines. Mm-hmm. That whole thing. It's a set of rules. They're not destroying the game. They're not breaking down the wall and saying, okay, well, I'm going to cast Fireball, but I'm going to roll 100 dice. Like, no.
Like, but you think like, I want to do a shape charge, or I want to set something up, or I'd like to bend this wall of fire in a certain way. Yeah. And these things are all interesting. And if the player works at them and gets them into the story, let them bend those rules, but then hold them to those bends. Though, whatever it was that they brought up to that's now the new standard. That's now the new place where you start from. And you can use that in interesting ways. Like, if they do something, they do an action in an interesting way that does a new thing, a new way to cast a spell, or a new technological device that they create. Now it's out there in the world, and you can tie that into your bad guys using it. You can tie that into good NPCs or town people finding out about it, and that can sort of bring in the whole actions have consequences, and your world is more alive. And a living world gives better immersion.
Yeah, no, again, it's really just trying to immerse yourself. And the one place that I can think of that needs the the most help, okay, and this is really the hardest thing to do. And Josh has it written down here. I can't stress this enough. Speed up your combat. Okay, it's not it. Combat is the slowest part of telling a game. It is generally the thing that most players like the best. But if it is slow, I do not care if they like it. They will hate it. Everybody hates slow combat. Okay. If you cannot figure out how to work through a turn order, people become so disengaged, and it then just becomes a numbers game. It just becomes like, okay, it's time for me to roll dice. I attack. Okay. Like, no, you want your players to engage in the combat. You want them to be cinematically talking about how they're throwing around their swords. You want them to talk about how they're using the cover. You want them to talk. You want it to feel threatening. I've talked about this in multiple episodes about combat, and I cannot stress it enough. Combat does not feel fun for me when it is a slog. If you're like, okay, and so who comes next? All right, that's my caterpillar demon. Okay, I got it. It's gonna attack you. No, like, don't do that. You've got to be better. Okay, this is like the one area that you need to be better. You need to have combat flow better.
There are some ways you can speed it up. And there are some systems that actually do combat in a more dynamic way. Pathfinder Second Ed is supposed to be really good at it, and I'd like to run a game soon to just see how it is. But there's a couple of things you can do in whatever game you're currently playing that are going to make it better also. Number one, let your players know who's up next.
I would just display the turn order.
Yeah, displaying the turn order is great, but I'd go so far as to say, hey, you're up next. Because when you're talking about a long fight, it can be 10, 20, 30 minutes to a round at times. If there's a lot of things going on, and letting a person know that they're up next just because they're on the screen doesn't mean they're paying attention.
Well, so I'm not just talking about like VTT, like you're up next and you're intermixed with a bunch of different things. Have your enemies, you're going to talk about this in a second, but have your enemies all in the same initiative section, and have your players all above your enemies. Like, the players should go first. And I know that you might be like, well, that's just crazy. Like, the enemies have way better dexterity and they should go first. No, just let your players go first, because if your players are the ones engaging in the combat, they will be more likely to do it. And then when you get through your enemies, my God, speed through them. Your enemies all have very simple, stupid actions. Okay, I don't care what they are.
Yeah. So, well, I don't necessarily have the players go first. I like to intersperse the enemies with the players, but, and I won't stress this enough, group the enemies up into blocks. Like, all of the goblins go as a block, because I know what the goblins are going to do. We do it all together, done. And then all of the archers go together as a block. And by setting them up as these individual blocks, you can speed through those actions without having to be like, okay, what's this ability? What's that thing? I've got like a ton of things going on. No. A goes like A. Okay, now it's Jeff's turn. B goes like B. Now it's Sam's turn. C goes like C. Now it's Jessica's turn. And that way, you can intersperse based on combat rolls, based on initiative rolls or whatever, but you can block your enemies and make them quicker. Another way to make your enemies quicker, especially with damage rolls, use average damage. You don't have to go and roll all of your damage all of the time. You've got some average rolls for damage out there. You got a bunch of mobs. Don't worry about it. Or mooks or whatever you want to call your basic enemy. Run them as trash mobs with that average damage. Named NPCs, like big guys, bosses, the BBEGs, whatever it is, you should roll for because those are their own thing. But any of their henchmen, average damage and clean it up quick. Yeah.
When it comes to average damage, okay, I'm going to ask you this: have you ever let your players just do average damage?
No.
Why?
Because rolling gives them the opportunity for something better.
What if one of your players is just cursed with the unlucky dice?
I don't think I've had that. But okay, yes, the unlucky dice in terms of, I have seen just a person go on a bad streak of rolls.
It's just a side tangent. I've played in the game where we're all rolling, and so we're like, I got 4 damage out of a possible 21, and then the GM's like, I do 37 because that's the average damage.
That is mean. That is terribly mean.
So I'm just
I've been on that myself with some characters, and I don't know. This is a side tangent. I have gone through and picked out specific spells or character traits that would allow me to do things without having to necessarily roll myself for things. Where it's saves versus what my
let your GM roll the save. Yeah. Looks like you're hit by the mega damage now, or a little bit of damage. You decide. Anyways,
but having the enemies do the average damage is nice. Not because I want to all of my bad guys to do big damage. It's because it makes it quicker. It's a speed thing rather than I don't necessarily want my bad guys going in there and rolling max damage on the hits to kill my players all the time, because I get a couple of really good rolls and then what I thought was a quick and easy fight has become a brutal fight for the players. It can screw with balance.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Anyways, what are some things that we don't want to do when we're suspending disbelief? We'll try to rattle these off pretty quick because the episode has been going long on the stuff we should do.
I've seen people do this before, and I understand the concept, but I absolutely hate it. Is that you take leveling up and other mechanics of the world and of the game and make them an in-world thing, where your players want to level up, they've got to go find a master and talk to them to get their new skills, and it's dumb.
It can work. I wouldn't advise it. I mean, if you want to do it once, go for it, but otherwise never do it again.
Yeah. Yeah. It's unnecessary in terms of this is their training is to be this to be A. If they wanted to switch over and do B, yeah, you know what? Maybe make them search it out or find something. They can't just in the middle of a jungle decide they want to be a sorcerer. No. You got to have some reason.
Put limits on it, and then you can find ways to move them along when they're out of the action.
Another big thing, we talked about role-playing NPCs. You don't have to role-play all of them. You got shopkeeps and innkeeps. You got, various people walking along the street. Interesting ones. Not everybody has a story to tell. Not everybody wants to talk to you. You go to the supermarket, and the whoever's bagging your groceries doesn't want to have a lengthy conversation about, the price of eggs. They don't care. Take your groceries and leave. Your NPC should be the same thing.
This is also your players sort of need to suspend this disbelief, which is, I know some NPCs aren't worth talking to, and your GM should be able to break the fourth wall and go, this person can't tell you anything. Stop talking to him. Okay. And you should be able to go, that's all right.
He stares at you with a blank look and a little bit of drool running down his chin. It's like, yeah, you're not getting anything from this guy. And I think the last thing that's very important, like we talked about motivations, your players are going to have motivations. They're going to have, if your NPCs have decent motivations, your players are going to start picking up on that, and they might utilize that as well. And if they do something that doesn't follow along with their stated motivations or the stated play style, don't penalize them for making the decisions that they're making.
This is a hard one because a lot of GMs fall into the trap of doing this. And I think that, what ends up happening is that your players are going to play themselves. Okay. And so even if they've put a bunch of clever motivations on the piece of paper, even though Steve's playing, I forgot the name he gave his awesome character, but Steve's basically going to play Steve, skinned as that wizard or whatever he's playing, rogue. Okay. The problem is that Steve has different motivations, or Steve might not have good motivations starting the game. He had to come up with some because you demanded them at session 0. And Steve now has test driven the car that is his character, and he's come up with a bunch of great motivations. Don't kill him.
Yeah. And the actions of the story could have adjusted the character's worldview. And, take note of those things, come back to them if needed, but don't penalize your characters for participating in your story.
Suspend your disbelief.
Exactly.
All right. You got anything else, Josh?
I'm really happy that my kids want to listen to this. And I think that, sort of giving the information about these sort of things to that next generation of gamers is it's kind of cool.
Well, there you go. It is very cool. I'm glad that they want to listen to it. I hope that they take something from it. I'll try to make sure the podcast stays a little bit cleaner because some of the earlier episodes are quite raunchy. Well, they're not raunchy, but they're full of swears and stuff.
No, my children are tiny little pirates. They swear like sailors.
Anyways, that's going to wrap us up for this week. If you have thoughts on ways to suspend your disbelief or examples of maybe when players haven't done it or times when maybe you have not been so flexible with suspending disbelief, let us know. levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com or facebook.com/levelupyourgaming. Also, the podcast is on YouTube, so smash the like button there or review the podcast, subscribe, recommend to friends, maybe share it with your kids if you're a little okay with some language here and there. Let us know. Anyways, that's going to wrap us up for the week. So for Josh, I'm Aaron. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.